2 years ago, I had a problem with the tires on my car. It was fairly new and reliable, but they started to show significant wear. I realized I needed them replaced while shopping at a Kmart near my apartment. I was near the back corner of the store and noticed they had an auto center. It was tucked away and I'd never really seen it before. I decided to check their tire selection and prices. As I walked into the area, I noticed it was deserted. I went to the desk, but no one was there. The auto center seemed outdated and rarely used. After a minute, I decided to just look at the tire information and leave. The next day, when I got home from work, I found a postcard in my mail from the Kmart Auto Center. It was an advertisement. I found it a funny coincidence, having just been there the day before. The next day, I got another identical postcard. It went from a funny coincidence to a bit strange. I threw it away. The next day, I got another, and the day after that, and the day after that. I was getting the same flyer every single day. I drove back to the Kmart to see what was going on, taking a handful of the flyers with me. This time, there was someone working, a woman behind the counter. I showed her the flyers and explained the situation. She said she didn't know why I kept getting them and had no explanation. However, she pointed out that none of the postcards were actually addressed to me and showed me a large stack of them near the counter. I realized someone was physically putting them in my mailbox every day. I kept watch on my mailbox. The first 2 days I got more flyers but didn't see anyone. Then one morning around 5:30 a.m. before sunrise, I happened to be looking out my window. I saw a figure walking down the street. I watched as they approached my mailbox, reached into their jacket and placed something inside. I'd finally seen who was doing it. But just as they did, they looked up at my window and made direct eye contact with me. Before I could react, the figure sprinted across my yard toward my house. They ran to the front door and tried the handle. Luckily, it was locked. I watched them run away, but then I heard the back door being jiggled. I called the police. As I hung up, I heard glass breaking. I ran into my bathroom and locked the door. After the glass broke, I didn't hear anything. I waited, and then I finally decided to leave the bathroom. As soon as I did, I saw the figure standing inside my house about 10 feet away, grinning. It was terrifying. They wore a hooded jacket and I couldn't make out many details of their face. I ran back into the bathroom and locked the door. Thankfully, I then heard sirens. The figure was gone when the police arrived. They searched the property and neighborhood but never found them. I never got any more flyers and I never saw the figure again, but I still wonder what they were doing. Subscribe to MR Night Story for more chilling tales. Story 2. The Buffalo Wild Wings Incident. Last year, I went to a sports bar called The Dugout with my friend Alex. It wasn't our usual hangout spot. This was a different location we'd never been to before in a town we were visiting. It wasn't packed, but it was moderately busy for a Tuesday night around 8 p.m. We got a booth in the back, which was nice because it felt more private. We ordered, and after a while our server didn't come back. This wasn't a huge problem, but I wanted more soda. Then the TV directly in front of us went black. Words appeared on the screen. My name and Alex's name repeated, followed by "we know." My friend and I looked at each other, confused. It couldn't be a joke, no one there knew us. Our server never returned. Eventually, another employee quickly walked up, handed us our checks and walked away without a word. They came back a minute later, took our cards, returned them and left again, still silent. The TV went back to showing sports. As we left, my friend and I asked a different employee if there had been any problems with the TVs. She just shrugged and walked away. We went back to my car, and as I was getting in, I distinctly heard someone whisper my name loudly, maybe 20 feet away. I froze and listened but heard nothing else. We left, ending a very bizarre and creepy experience at the Dugout. Subscribe to MR Night Story for more unsettling encounters. Story 3. The Facebook Marketplace Stalker. Last year I really needed a new laptop. I used a computer daily for school and work, and my old one was incredibly slow. I'd been saving up for a while. My roommate suggested I look on Craigslist. One night, I searched for laptops looking for a newer, more powerful model. After several days and a lot of research, I found a listing that seemed like a great deal. I contacted the seller, whose name was Kevin. He responded quickly and said he could meet me the next afternoon after work. I told him I was willing to buy the laptop as long as it worked, for his asking price of $700 cash. It was much cheaper than buying it new. We agreed to meet in the parking lot of a local library. It was usually busy, but we parked in a quieter corner. My roommate came with me. We arrived a few minutes early at 3 p.m. I'd messaged Kevin when we left and he said he was leaving too. When he wasn't there, I assumed he was running late. Time passed and we got concerned. No one was near us and Kevin was now over 10 minutes late. I messaged him again telling him exactly where we were. He read the message but didn't respond. After almost 30 minutes we left, frustrated. My roommate suggested maybe he realized the laptop was worth more. When we got back to our apartment I checked Craigslist again. I'd been blocked by Kevin and the listing was gone. I was furious. I started searching for other laptops. Then my roommate came running into my room, saying she heard a noise at the back window and saw someone outside. We heard the back door open. It was only 4 p.m. and our other roommates weren't due home until later. We ran back to my room and shut the door. Someone was walking through our apartment. My room was at the end of the hall, but the person was close. My roommate called the police, but as she did, we heard footsteps coming toward us. We got quiet. Whoever it was walked into the hallway and then into my roommate's room. I had an idea. I pointed to my window. It was a ground floor apartment, so we could escape. I quietly opened the window, but it made a loud noise. Just then, we heard the person leaving my roommate's room and coming down the hall toward my bedroom. I jumped out the window, followed by my roommate. As she climbed out, I heard my bedroom door open. We ran to the neighbors across the street and called the police from their house. When the police arrived, the person was still in our apartment. They caught him hiding in a closet. It was Kevin. He'd been in the parking lot the whole time, then followed us home and tried to break in, presumably for the cash. I'll never use Craigslist again. Subscribe to MR Night Story for more real-life horrors. Story 4. The Home Depot Follower. This happened a few months ago while I was shopping at Lowe's. I went to look at some gardening tools for projects I'd been putting off. I went on a Wednesday evening because I wanted to get some work done on Thursday. The store was fairly empty. I went to the gardening section and compared some tools and prices. I was alone until a person came into the aisle. They were at one end and I was at the other. After about 2 or 3 minutes, I saw them moving closer. The person was tall, maybe 6 feet, wearing a blue jacket and jeans. They looked middle-aged and had a short, neatly trimmed beard. They said hello and I said hello back. They then asked if I could spare some change. I said no and walked away. I heard them mutter something under their breath. I realized I'd forgotten to look at some specific tools, but I didn't want to go back right away. I decided to get some plant food I also needed and then go back, hoping the person would be gone. I got the plant food, which was at the other end of the store, and as I headed back, I saw the same person again walking in my direction. We made awkward eye contact. I got back to the gardening aisle and was there for about 30 seconds before I saw the same person enter the aisle again. They were just staring at me and shaking their head. I ignored them, but I realized they'd probably followed me across the store and back. I finally chose 2 tools and went to the checkout. The person followed. I was worried they might try something in the parking lot. They weren't buying anything. As I checked out, I saw them standing near the magazine rack watching me. There were 2 main exits, one near the entrance and one near the checkout. I started walking toward the entrance as it was farther from the person. They then started heading that way too, speeding up. I changed my mind and went out the other doors. This worked. I didn't see them turn around. My car was parked on that side anyway. I rushed to my car and got inside. I felt relieved, but as soon as I shut my door and looked in the rearview mirror, there they were. They were standing directly behind my car, staring at me. They yelled at me to get out of my car. I locked the doors and started the engine. The person ran to my rear passenger door and tried to open it. I quickly backed out, turned, and sped away. I never saw them again. Subscribe to MR Night Story for more tales of unsettling encounters. Story 5. The Bank Robbery Attempt. This happened years ago when I was in college. I was planning to buy a used car and had saved some money. I went to the credit union to withdraw $6,000 in cash. There was a car at a nearby used car lot I was interested in. I got to the credit union just before closing. It was quiet. I got the money with a few minutes to spare. As I turned to leave, I saw someone sitting near the entrance looking at me. I left and the person left too. I started walking to my car and heard the person walking behind me. I looked back, but they had changed direction and were walking to their car. I got in my car and drove home. I lived close to the credit union. I noticed a sedan was behind me when I turned onto the quiet road before my street. It turned onto my road after me. Then when I pulled into my parents' driveway, the sedan turned in too. I stayed in my car waiting to see what the person would do. They drove up and parked very close to my back bumper. After about 30 seconds, the person got out and approached my car. They walked quickly to my driver's window and motioned for me to roll it down. I started to, but as I did, they tried to open my door. They reached inside as the window lowered and grabbed my shoulder, trying to find the door lock. I put the car in drive and moved forward a few feet, then backed up and turned around. I partially dragged the person, but they finally let go as I sped away. I called my parents who were home and then I called the police. The person ran back to their sedan and drove off. When the police arrived, they were gone. I didn't get their license plate, but I gave the police a description of the person and the car. They never came back. I think they saw me leave the credit union with the cash and tried to rob me. Subscribe to Amar Night Story for more true crime stories. Story 6. The Yard Sale Stalker. I had a garage sale at my house a few years ago. I cleaned out everything and put it all in my yard and driveway. I lived in a fairly populated area, so I expected a lot of people. I planned the sale for 2 days, Friday and Saturday. As expected, many people came on the first day. I was selling more than I thought I would. Everything was going well. I was busy helping people and didn't pay attention to everyone there. Then, a woman told me a man had gone through my backyard and seemed suspicious, like he was trying to get into my house. I hadn't noticed and hadn't been watching the backyard. I went to check but didn't see anyone. I looked around for a few seconds but had to get back to the front yard. The woman said she thought the man had left but wanted to let me know. She gave me a description of him just in case I saw him again. I kept an eye out but didn't see him for the rest of the day. The first day went well. I made a lot of money. Eventually, it got late and people stopped coming, so I closed the sale for the day. I moved everything into my garage and locked it. I went inside and watched TV for a bit. I planned to start the sale early the next day around 7 a.m., so I went to bed. Later that night, I heard noises downstairs like someone was walking around. I immediately thought of the man from the backyard. I locked my bedroom door and listened. I kept hearing someone walking around in the living room. I reached for my phone to call the police, but it wasn't there. I always had my phone with me. I realized I must have left it downstairs on the couch where I'd been watching TV. That was also where whoever was downstairs was. I eventually heard the person start up the stairs. My heart raced. They came up and started down the hallway. My door was the second on the right. They walked closer. They stopped right at my door and tried the handle. It didn't open because it was locked. They continued down the hallway and then went back downstairs. I listened for a long time but didn't hear anything else. I thought maybe they had left. I wasn't sure why they were there or how they had gotten in. I waited for about an hour and then decided to go downstairs for my phone. I walked down to the dark living room. I didn't see or hear anyone. I looked on the couch and my phone was there between the cushions. I got it and went back upstairs and called the police. They came a while later. I spoke to an officer outside. Then, to my surprise, a few officers came out with the man. He had been hiding under my staircase in a closet with a knife. Subscribe to Amar Night Story for more scary home invasion stories. Story 7. The Woods Hike Stalker. This happened during my senior year of high school in the spring semester. I had an elective class called Outdoor Fitness. I was an athlete, so it seemed fun and easy. We did sprinting drills and played games. The teacher, Mr. Davis, mixed it up a lot. One day, Mr. Davis said we were going on a hike off campus. Our high school was a bit out in the country. Across the street was a large wooded area with hiking trails. We met in the gym, then walked across the street to the trail. Mr. Davis said we would jog part of the trail and hike the rest. He took off running. There were about 15 kids in the class. I hung back with a couple of friends. We ran in the back and fell pretty far behind. The deeper we got into the woods, the thicker it became and the path narrowed. My shoe came untied and I stopped to tie it. My friends offered to stop, but I told them I'd catch up. I finished tying my shoe and continued jogging. I didn't hear anyone else. I ran faster to catch up, but I came to a point where the trail split into 3 different paths. I didn't know which way the class had gone, so I chose the middle one. I ran until I was out of breath but saw no one. I ran back to the split and tried a different path. By this point, I was lost. I jogged along another path and thought I heard someone. I ran faster. I saw someone, which made me feel better until I got closer and realized it wasn't someone from my class. A grown man was walking off the path to my left. I was far away. Through the trees, I could see he had long brown hair and a dark jacket. As I got closer, he stopped, turned, and looked at me. I thought about waving, but he started running deeper into the woods. I realized I was lost. I didn't have my phone. Mr. Davis didn't let us bring them to class. I thought maybe the man would know how to get out, so I yelled, "Hey!" He didn't answer. 2 or 3 minutes later, I heard someone walking behind me just off the path. I stopped and looked back. I barely saw the man in the dark jacket behind a tree. He was hiding. I turned back and kept walking. I heard him walking behind me again, getting closer. I turned around. I caught him just as he was about to step onto the path. He ducked back behind the trees. I said hello in a friendly tone and asked if he knew how to get out of the woods. He didn't answer. Then he charged out from his hiding place and ran at me with a crazed look. I turned and ran. He was fast, but I was faster. I sprinted. When the path split, I chose a different direction at the last second. Eventually, I took a sharp left, went through some thick brush and back onto another path. The man seemed to go in a different direction. I continued quietly down the path. I thought I'd lost him. Then I turned a corner and saw the path led to a pond. There was a small dock and thick woods surrounded the pond. I heard noises in the woods getting closer. It was the man. He was walking quickly toward me. I sprinted back the way I'd come. I kept running, hoping I'd find a way out. I heard him running behind me almost the whole way. Finally, I stopped hearing him so close. I slowed to a jog. I went back down every path I'd been on. Finally, I saw an opening. I'd made it back to where we'd started the hike. I didn't know what time it was or where the rest of the class was. Subscribe to Amar Knight's story for more terrifying wilderness encounters. Story 8, The Odd Job Offer. This happened a few years back when I was working part-time at a bookstore called The Book Nook. It was a slow Tuesday afternoon and there weren't many customers. I was organizing some shelves when a man came in. He looked to be in his late 40s, wearing a faded denim jacket and work boots. He browsed for a bit, then came up to the counter where I was. He asked me if I knew of anyone looking for some extra work. I said I wasn't sure, but he could put up a flyer on our community board. He said he wasn't looking for just anyone. He needed someone reliable for a specific task. He explained he owned a small storage unit business on the outskirts of town and needed someone to help him clean out some units that had been abandoned. He said he'd pay well in cash and it wouldn't be a regular job, just a few days of work. It sounded a little odd, but I was a college student at the time and always looking for extra cash. I asked him for more details. He said the units were mostly filled with old furniture and junk, nothing dangerous, but it was a big job for one person. He gave me his business card, which had his name, Mr. Henderson, and a phone number. He said to call him if I was interested or knew anyone who might be. I took the card and he left. I thought about it for a few days. The pay he offered was good, but something about the whole thing felt off. I decided to mention it to my manager, Sarah. Sarah listened to my story and then looked at the business card. She frowned and said she'd never heard of any storage unit business with that name in the area. She suggested I look it up online. I did and nothing came up. There was no business listing, no website, nothing. That made me really uneasy. I decided not to call Mr. Henderson. A few weeks later, I was working again when the same man came back into the bookstore. He came straight to the counter and asked if I'd thought about his offer. I told him I wasn't interested. He pressed me asking why. I just said I wasn't available. He stared at me for a moment, then turned and left without saying another word. I never saw him again, but I'm glad I didn't take that job. Subscribe to Amar Knight's story for more strange encounters. Story 9, The Strange Phone Calls. This happened last spring. I started getting strange phone calls at my apartment. It would usually happen late at night, around 1 or 2 a.m. The phone would ring and when I answered there would be silence on the other end. Sometimes I could hear faint breathing, but that was it. At first I thought it was a wrong number or a prank. But it kept happening night after night. I started getting anxious every time the phone rang late at night. I tried ignoring the calls, but they would just keep ringing. One night I decided to try something different. When I answered the phone, I didn't say anything. I just listened. After a few seconds of silence, I heard a faint whisper. It sounded like someone saying my name. It was barely audible, but I was sure I heard it. I hung up terrified. I didn't sleep well that night. The next day I talked to my neighbor Mark about it. He suggested I try blocking the number if it was showing up on caller ID. But the calls were coming from a private number. The calls continued for another week. Then one night when I answered, there was no silence, no breathing, no whisper. Instead I heard a recording. It was a distorted robotic voice saying, "I'm coming for you." I slammed the phone down. I was so scared I didn't know what to do. I stayed up the rest of the night. Every time I heard a noise I was terrified. The next morning I went to the police station and filed a report. They said there wasn't much they could do since the calls were coming from a private number, but they took down the information. After that, the calls stopped. I never found out who was making them or why, but it was a very unsettling experience. Subscribe to Amar Knight's story for more terrifying phone call stories. Story 10, The Unexpected Guest. This happened last winter. I was home alone at my condo. It was a Friday night and I was relaxing watching a movie. Around 10 p.m. I heard a knock at the door. I wasn't expecting anyone. I looked through the peephole but didn't see anyone. I thought maybe it was someone at the wrong apartment. I went back to the couch, but then I heard another knock, louder this time. I looked through the peephole again. Still nothing. I cautiously opened the door a crack and called out, "Hello?" No one answered. I opened the door a little wider and looked around the hallway. There was no one there. I was confused. I was about to close the door when I looked down. There on my doormat was a small hand-carved wooden doll. It was crudely made, but it was definitely a doll. I picked it up and looked at it closely. It had painted eyes and a stitched-on smile. It was creepy. I went back inside and closed the door. I didn't know where the doll had come from. I didn't remember seeing anyone. I put the doll on the kitchen counter and went back to watching my movie. About an hour later, I heard another knock. I looked through the peephole. This time there was someone there. It was a young girl, maybe 8 or 9 years old. She was wearing a winter coat and a hat. I opened the door. The girl looked up at me with wide eyes. She didn't say anything. She just pointed at the doll on my counter. I looked back at the doll, then back at the girl. She was still pointing. I asked her if the doll was hers. She nodded slowly. I picked up the doll and handed it to her. She took it and then turned and ran down the hallway. I watched her go, completely bewildered. I never saw her again. I still wonder where she came from and why she left the doll in the first place. Some questions never get answered and some mysteries remain unsolved. But that's the nature of the night. Thanks for joining me on MR Night Story. Subscribe for more stories that will keep you up at night.